Namaste and welcome from the Center for Indic Studies. It's indeed my pleasure to have you all for the first seminar of this year and also the first seminar of our spring semester uh, on a topic which I'm sure will interest you all because it concerns the environment, and the environment, of course, is necessary for all of us. I don't have to tell you that the environment is suffering, has been now suffering from a variety of stresses for some time. And it's not just climate change, it's a lack of biodiversity, our exposure to all kinds of chemicals through all kinds of pathways, ingestion, inhalation, whatever, noise pollution, light pollution. So there are all these stresses, and the question, and we all also, I think, we would agree that this is because of our greed, and it's all anthropogenic because of the framework that we seem to excel in, that only what it matters to humans is what we should be doing. So that has created all kinds of problems. But when we try to look at answers, then of course we have this very rich tradition from Indic philosophy or Indic knowledge systems, the knowledge system of Vedanta. And indeed, Vedanta, of course, has many facets. Today, we'll be interested in what Vedanta has to teach us about this practical application of how we deal with the environment. And for that, we have no better person to tell us than Vandana Sharma Dia. She is an assistant professor of philosophy at Zakir Hussain College in Delhi. And she has a very strong academic credential. It's all in the email that we sent. Just to highlight a couple of things, she has a bachelor's and master's degree in Bharatiya Darshan Shastra, followed by a PhD and postdoctoral work in Advaita, so Advaita Vedanta. And among her books, there is this book, Shankara Vedanta for Environmental Harmony, which I'll try to get a copy of very soon, because environment also happens to be an area that I'm very interested in. My background is environmental engineering, but of course, engineering cannot be done in a vacuum. We do need the pillars of science and philosophy. She also is a recipient of the Power Woman Award. So I'm sure, are in for a treat. So Vandana ji, we will begin when you are ready. If you want, would you be having a PowerPoint file or?
No. I
Okay,
will just be talking.
okay.
Yes.
So you will have about, let's say, 45 minutes of uninterrupted time, during which I would request all others to please mute yourselves. And after that, we will have a Q&A. This is being recorded, and our custom is that maybe in a couple of days, we will then post this recording on our YouTube channel, and we also distribute it to other groups. So with that, Vandana ji, thank you so much for agreeing, and please begin.
सदाशिव समारंभां शंकराचार्य मध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्य पर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरु परंपरां श्रुति स्मृति पुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शंकरं लोक शंकरं सर्वेभ्यः नमो नमः. My heartfelt pranams to Professor Pappu. And thank you so much, Professor Sen Gupta and Belaji, for having me here to speak on Advaita and environment. So let me start by telling you that humanity at the moment is at a critical turning point, facing challenges that are stemming not only from external forces, but from deep internal disharmony. Greed, competition, ego, and the relentless pursuit of control manifest as pollution, as wars, as cruelty on other sentient beings. As we shape the world around us, our inner turmoil, which is very disturbing.
Think we lost Vandana ji, so we will wait for her to rejoin. She had actually joined from two devices. One of them, Vandana ji, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. My apologies. I don't know what just suddenly happened. So we were just talking about the internal turmoil, which is there within all of us. Now, this makes us, discontent within. Now, this imbalance is caused by our collective loss of self-awareness, reducing everything to just material concerns. However, Advaita Vedanta stands as an ancient source of wisdom, offering a path not just to understand the nature of reality, but to live in a way that nurtures harmony within ourselves and the world around us. So it is important for us to understand that it is not just a philosophy, rather, it is a way of life. Now, let me take you a little back and talk about Bible genesis of creation, which forms the foundation of the anthropocentric worldview, shaping both theology and the later scientific thought. Now, it is important for us to understand that this establishes a hierarchy, a utilitarian approach, and dualism, where humans dominate nature. Nature is meant for the use of man, and man stands at the top of nature or at the center of nature. Now, these ideas have deeply affected or influenced science also. It is also here important for us to understand that the word environment comes from the old 12th century French word environner, meaning to surround or encircle. Now, while it seems very neutral, to all of us, however, it actually reflects a human-centric view because surrounding suggests a point of reference, which is always human. So originally a spatial term in the 13th and 14th century, environment gradually came to include surrounding conditions, and later it became a scientific term in ecology by the 19th century. So during the scientific revolution, the anthropocentric and materialistic view of environment became extremely dominant. And, this view was further shaped by thinkers such as Francis Bacon, Rene Descartes, John Locke, Herbert Spencer, and William Blackstone. The Western scientific perspective is defined by first utilitarian approach, second, mechanistic view, third, economic focus, and fourth, technological control. Therefore, it is well understood and quite obvious that Cartesian dualism became a dominant idea, shaping scientific thought and further complicating things and further dividing nature into living and non-living, where those organisms that grew, that died, that took birth were living, and the sun, the moon, the water, the air were labeled as non-living. And even in living, we had creatures which had no consciousness or no mind. And here came another Norwegian philosopher called Arne, the founder of deep ecology, who became a, pull, I can say, who became a bridge and connected the Western analytical philosophy and Indian wisdom. Over nearly 7 decades, his intellectual journey evolved from logical positivism to ecological philosophy shaped by Vedantic thought. And I recall that I read this article in which it was written that he was interviewed by David Rothenberg, and in that interview he said he appreciated Advaita Vedanta and gave and recognized Advaita Vedanta and said that the non-dualistic framework of Advaita Vedanta provided a way out of the subject-object divide that has troubled Western environmental thought for ages. However, here I want all of you to also understand that it is not just the Western world that is reaping the consequences of harming environment, but even Bharatvarsh, India, where nature was once worshipped, and trees, birds, and animals, and the five great elements, they were worshipped as a manifestation of the Supreme. Today, it has become the third largest beef exporter in the world, witnessing deforestation and the extinction of various species. What went wrong? Where did we go astray? So, today, as we are discussing Advaita Vedanta, it is important for us to recognize that it transcends dualism. In this philosophy, the environment is not external, but it is seen as a reflection of our internal states. And our internal states, or the Antahakarna, is made of Man, Buddhi, Ahankara, and Chitta. So when we experience emotions such as anger, jealousy, hate, or violence, they manifest one internally as stress, depression, and anxiety. Two, they manifest physically as diseases like diabetes, hypertension, blood pressure, so on and so forth. Three, within families, this anger and jealousy and hate and violence, they manifest as strained relationships. Socially, they manifest as rapes, cruelty on other sentient beings, corruption, and other social evils. Fifth, nationally, they manifest as wars, and globally, they manifest as pollution and environmental disharmony. Therefore, the goal is to address the pollution within ourselves, to live a life rooted in non-dualism and consciousness, fostering coexistence and cooperation. Now, it is also important that we visit or revisit our Vedantic wisdom, where we once worshipped water bodies, animals, birds, and the entire cosmos, recognizing that while these names and forms through which the Supreme manifests or expresses itself may be transient, but the underlying cause, the Supreme Brahman, was, is, and will always be. It is this eternal reality that should be celebrated rather than destroyed. Also, it is important at this juncture to point out that, we all must immediately put an end to consumerism, the utilitarian approach, and the individualistic thinking that we have developed, and instead align ourselves with Vedantic teachings of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. We need to realize that when we destroy nature, we are in fact destroying ourselves, for we are not separate from nature. We are a very small part of nature. In fact, we are nature. We must stop seeing the world in fragments, for each part is a whole, and the whole is nothing but a collection of interconnected, wholesome parts. Thus, the cosmos has no single center. Rather, there are multiple centers in the cosmos. Which brings me to the point that we must overcome the crude concept of Cartesian dualism, which breaks everything down into parts in order to understand it. Well, while you can cut open a hen, a rabbit, a human being, and know the physical components that they are made of. However, you cannot truly understand the unique essence of every hen in the cosmos, of every rabbit in the cosmos, of every human being in the cosmos. For each sentient being is bestowed with a distinct personality. A hen, a rabbit, a tree, a human being, they are all living, breathing, throbbing beings. They are meant to be realized and not dissected into parts like a machine. Now, Vedanta does not divide things into living or non-living. For there is a simple logic behind this. You know, the air, the water, the sun, which gives us life, can itself not be lifeless. I always tell my students that a dog comes out from a dog, and a cat comes out from a cat, and a rose comes out from a rose, and therefore living comes out from living. Life comes out from life, and not from that which is dead or which is lifeless or which is non-living. And therefore, the point which I made earlier, that science says that there is living and non-living, and they have regarded air, water, and sun to be non-living. They cannot be non-living. They are filled with divinity. They are giving life, and therefore we are alive, and that is the very proof of it. Now, common, while I was, I've been in my entire journey of studying Advaita, a common critique of Advaita Vedanta, especially in the context of Adi Shankar's teachings, is the claim that it lacks ethics. But have we considered why is this the case? Well, ethics, love, hate, so on and so forth exist where there is distinction, where there is dualism, where there are two. In a non-dual reality where there is no division, why would anyone need ethics? However, for those who are enveloped in avidya or ignorance, Advaita does provide a path. Now, while Advaita may not offer commandments at the highest level or ethics at the highest level, it establishes foundation through the sadhana chatushtaya, which is the fourfold path of ethics, which prepares one to realize the non-dual state. And these fourfold path, they called Viveka, Vairagya, Shatta Sampati, and Mumukshutva, are important for anyone who wants to attain that state of non-dualism or the state of the Supreme Brahman. Another important thing here is to understand is that ethics in Vedanta are rooted in its metaphysics. So when Vedanta says Eko Vasi Sarva Bhuta Antar Atma, that one supreme indwells in all the creatures of the cosmos, it is not just speaking of highest non-dualism where there are no ethics, but it is also talking about it is also encouraging that one should see the self in all beings and all beings in the self at a worldly level, and therefore revere everything. And this becomes the path to realizing the Supreme. Another common misconception, which I've often come across, in my journey is that people always raise a question on the popular verse mentioned in the Vivek Chudamani called Brahma Satyam Jagana Mithya. Now, often people, translate this as only Brahman is real and Jagat is not real. Now, we have to understand that our great rishis had a beautiful way of, writing something in a mysterious manner. And you needed to understand that language, you needed to understand or decode those words in a very careful manner in order to avoid any kind of error. Therefore, when Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya says Brahma Satyam Jagana Mithya, he is not saying that Brahma is the only reality and this world is unreal. What he's trying to say is Brahman, which is non-dual, is real, which means non-duality, which is hiding behind apparent duality, is real. And apparent duality that you see is mithya. Mithya means it is neither real nor unreal. And therefore, it is important for us to also understand the difference between satya, asatya, and mithya, which is truth, untruth, and appearance. Truth is that which is neither born nor will it die. Truth is that which is beyond change. Truth is that which is same in all the three kala. Untruth is that like the son of a barren woman, like the sky flower, which never was, which never will be, and which is not. And mithya is that which is neither real and nor unreal. Therefore, when Jagadguru says Brahma Satyam Jagana Mithya, it does not mean that the world is unreal. Mithya has to be understood by the example of a mirage in the desert. Now, these verses, again, as I said, these verses are written in a specialized language, and rather than, interpreting them literally, we must develop the acumen to decode them properly and grasp their deeper significance. Also, people have got hold of this verse, Brahma Satyam Jaganamithya, but they often tend to overlook other teachings of Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya. For example, I would like to quote Aproksha Anubhuti here in verse 116. Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya says, दृष्टिम ज्ञानमयम कृत्वा पश्येद ब्रह्ममयम जगत, which means to see the supreme Brahman in the entirety of the cosmos is the noblest of all vision. Now, this teaching calls for a perspective that transcends the dualistic understanding, encouraging us to recognize the divine essence in all of the creation. So Advaita Vedanta is a journey from many to one, from Jiva to Shiv, from Nara to Narayan, from Atma to Brahma. It teaches us three important concepts of Sahavasa, Sahakara, and Sahabhoga. Sahavas, coexistence. All beings of the cosmos, irrespective of their size, shape, species, religion, so on and so forth, must coexist peacefully. Sakar, they should all work together as though they are performing a yajna, and each should give their ahuti in the yajna. And economics, distribution of wealth, which means so my internet connection may just go. I will rejoin. I'm getting a message just for your information. So, economics has this concept of distribution of wealth, and this distribution of wealth should be within the society so that the entire society prospers. So this emphasizes the interconnectedness and unity of all beings and the importance of harmony in the society and nature. Now, this holistic vision encourages mutual respect, shared responsibility, and collective well-being. Also, while we are discussing about Advaita Vedanta, it becomes very important that we take references from those people who have walked on the path of Advaita Vedanta and who have become live examples of that living philosophy. So when we look at the lives of Advaitic saints like Ramana Maharishi or Swami Vivekanand or Ramakrishna Paramhans, they did not retire into the caves. They did not, say that, okay, now we have realized the Brahman, now we will not do anything at all. Rather, they worked for the welfare and well-being of all. In fact, Ramakrishna Paramhans teaches Jitra Jiva Tatra Shiva, which means that wherever there is life, there is divinity, there is Shiva. And this perfectly aligns with the teachings of Bhagavad Gita Shankar Bhashya, particularly the 5th chapter, where Shankaracharya talks about Lok Sangraha and Sarva Bhutahit, well-being and wellness of all the creatures. Therefore, these saints embodied the principle of serving all creatures as an expression of being rooted in non-dualism. Now, a lot of people often ask me, so do you want us to become saints? No. We don't want you to become a yogi. We want you to live like a yogi. We want you to live in just like a yogi, but don't renounce the world. For example, when Sri Krishna gave the Gita Upadesh to Arjun, he did not tell him to renounce the world. We know that Bhagavad Gita talks about Vedanta. He told him to pick up his bow and arrow and fight the war of Mahabharata and come out as a winner. So when you follow the path of Vedanta, you can become a better teacher, a better student, a better mother, a better father, and a more conscious human being. Now, here I would also like to, quote Albert Einstein. In an interview, Albert Einstein was asked, about his belief in God, and he said that, I do not believe in a God which is separate from his creation. Rather, I believe in a God which manifests in his creation. And this is exactly what Jagadguru Adi Shankar has spoken about in numerous texts. He says you cannot separate the dance and the dancer. You cannot separate fire and heat. And therefore, you cannot separate the creator and the created. So there is hand of God in the entire creation. However, it is because of the Avaran Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti of Maya that, we don't see things as they are. We fail to see the Brahman, and what we see is the apparent duality. Now, I would just like to, conclude this by saying that the integration of Advaita Vedanta with environmental science offers a profound shift in how we view and interact with the world. Now, by transcending dualism and recognizing the interconnectedness of all life, Advaita Vedanta challenges the anthropocentric and materialistic perspectives that have led to environmental degradation. So, it calls for a return to self-awareness and ethical living, rooted in the understanding that the universe is a reflection of the one eternal supreme reality, the Brahman. So as long as we don't realize the Brahman, it is important to have Shraddha on the text. It is important to have Shraddha on the Guru. It is important to have Shraddha in the cosmic order. Embracing this wisdom can certainly guide us towards a more sustainable and more harmonious future where both humanity and nature will flourish. Now, I also, in fact, wanted to bring about, I had very little time, but I really wanted to speak about all the work that Jagadguru Adi Shankar has done. For example, the establishment of Dashnami Sampradaya, which is also related to ecology. So I'll just, highlight a few points. So, for example, he has in the Dashnami Sampradaya, he also has a Sampradaya called Van and Aranyak. Now, Van and Aranyak are interdependent on each other and therefore they are non-dual. If you have the one, you will have the Aranyak, which is the dense forest. it is the dense part of the forest. And if you have the Aranyak, you will have the one also. Now, the aim of establishing this sampradaya was that the Vanvasis, and Vanvasis are not just human beings, all the beings are protected by the Van and Aranyak Sampradaya. The Parvat and the Giri Sampradaya were supposed to take care of the Vanvasis in the Parvat and the Giri. However, our Shankaracharyas failed to do that. Over a period of time, all the mutts that were established in ecological sensitive areas such as the Mahanadi in Puri Mutt, and we have the Badrinath forest in Joshi Mutt, near the Joshi Mutt. And then we have, we also have in the Sringeri Mutt, we have the Narsimha forests. But at the end of the day, we just, concentrated on Karma Kand in all these mutts, and we forgot the very teachings that Jagat Guru Adi Shankaracharya gave in the Mahamathanushashanam, which is a text which is very important for all the four mutts. We forgot all of that. Jagat Guru, in fact, there's a very beautiful, I've also mentioned this in my research PhD. So when Jagat Guru Adi Shankaracharya went to Sringeri, why did he establish the Sringeri Mutt there only? So when he went there, he saw a frog a female frog giving birth to her babies, tadpoles. And he saw that, a snake had opened his hood and was covering her completely so that, the sun doesn't hurt her. Now, he saw a beautiful scene and he wanted to capture this. And this is even today, it is there at the Sringeri Mutt. You can see it in the form of an idol. What did this entire event tell us? This entire event tells us that, no matter how distinct you are in your guna, no matter how distinct you are in your swabhava, there has to be coexistence. And that is the reason why Jagat Guru Adi Shankar established the mutt there. Now, these things we have completely forgotten, and we have also forgotten that Jagat Guru Adi Shankar was also the one who wrote the Kashi Shatkam. He was also the one who, Kashi Ashtakam. He was also the one who wrote Ganga Ashtakam, Yamuna Ashtakam, and therefore it is not that, he was just worshipping the body of Ganga. Well, body of Ganga is important, but at that point he was worshipping Ganga as the supreme Brahman, but was also worshipping the beautiful outer form of Ganga, which is responsible for giving life to all the beings who flock there. So it is important for us to understand that Advaita Vedanta, if we want that Advaita Vedanta tradition should carry on, it has to be made relevant in today's time. And therefore, Advaita Vedanta is not just for metaphysical realization. In fact, I would here also like to add that mumukshutva should not just be understood as a state of supreme realization or realization that the Atma was never in bondage and it will never be in bondage. That is the highest understanding of it. But at a material level, mukti from vyadhi is also mumukshutva. Mukti from avidya is also mumukshutva. Mukti from poverty is also mumukshutva. Mukti from social evils is also mumukshutva. Mukti does not happen like this. Mukti happens charan dar charan. It happens in levels. And therefore, it is important by having mukti at each step, we walk towards the supreme mukti, mumukshutva, the final level where, we see the self in all and all in the self, and we realize that the Atma was never in bondage, it will never be in bondage, it was Nitya Shuddh, Nitya Mukt, and Nitya Buddha. So with that, I give rest to my speech with a prayer to my Guru. Viditha khil shastra sudha jaladhi mahitopanishad kathitarth nidhe hridaye kamale vimalam charanam bhava shankar deshik me sharanam.
Thank you so much, Vandana ji, for beautifully explaining how Vedanta and environment, they correlate or they relate. And so beautifully pointing out that when we say these externals, when we see these external signs of the environment, the source is actually from within. And that's why in our tradition, when we say Prakriti doesn't just mean the outer environment, it includes the inner environment as well. And the inner environment, unless you have some means of establishing a balance there, you cannot just think of doing anything to help the external environment. Thank you so much. And for kind of highlighting that the primary reason for the situation that we are in is this Cartesian dualism. So now it's time for Q&A. So if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat box or raise your hand. Let's see. While, excuse me, while people are writing or asking their, forming their question, let me ask you, Vandana ji, about the concept of Rita in our tradition.
Yes, so Rit is the cosmic order. It also becomes the grounds for Satya. And therefore, Rit is basically the grounds for cosmic order, Satya and Dharma. They both are founded on the concept of Rita. The word Ritu comes from Rita. That which is, happening again and again is what, Rit is all about. And therefore, when we talk about, let's say, women having their menstrual cycles, that is called as dharma. So because it is happening again and again, and if it does not happen, it will stop creation. And similarly, rains are also dharma. So this cosmic order, which becomes the grounds for dharma to function, is Rita.
Wonderful. Questions for Vandana ji?
Okay, Vandana ji, can you hear me?
Yes, Pappu sir, I can hear you.
Yeah, it is very well put. In a very simple way, the problem of environmental ethics and ethics of environment, all this comes about because of a certain dualism with which we operate.
Yes.
We and the environment.
Yes.
Rather, the Vedantic perspective comes in three forms.
Correct.
Please, you can say Sarvam Vidam Khalu Brahmam. When everything is some kind of a, to use the Western terminology, a certain pantheistic view. I am nature, nature is me.
Correct.
Okay? In that case, there is no conflict between me and the nature. The second one is, in the Upanishads, there is a certain theory of creation, whereby in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is a passage where Brahman felt lonely. Being alone is not a matter of joy. So he split himself into two, as a man and a woman. They procreated. The human beings were born. Again, he split himself two, and then the animals were born. And then he has procreated himself, so to say, and then the environment was born. With the result, if you take that passage in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad seriously, just as other human beings are what? My own brethren and sisters, because we are all born to the same Brahman. And what are the animals? They are also like that. They are only born after us. What are the trees? They are also my brothers and sisters, because, but it's a kind of a third progeny of Brahman is the environment. With the result, environmental destruction or killing of the animals and all these things are simply killing your own kith and kin, So there is not really just as you can show a lot of affection to the humans, but also the same thing applies to the animals, and with the result
I agree.
in all the Hindu practices, yeah, we worship the cow, we worship the tulsi and all these things. Tulsi is not just it signifies something. That is to say, even the little plant tulsi is also a direct creation of Brahman, so to say. This is the second point of. So instead of and then instead of what is important here is you have to get rid of this dualism, which is where Vedanta stands. Me and the environment, forget about it. Me in the environment, or I am the environment. I'm not different from the environment. The whole problems arise it because of the separation
Correct.
between the human and the non-human. Okay, that is like essentially what you were telling also.
Absolutely.
Elaborated very well, in the putting it in the Shankara and the Vedanta context. And so long as we separate ourselves from the environment, we always have the problems. We think of it
More-
as
I am one and now I become many.
Yeah.
So, that supreme reality, when he or she or it, when manifests, as the entire cosmos, there is no first who came, there was no second who came. In a spirit, in a second, the entire cosmos came into being. So, eko aham bahusyam, I am one and I shall become many. And the same thing we get to see in Bhagavad Gita, Dasham and Ekadash Adhyaya of the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjun tells Shri Krishna, I want to see in which form should I worship you. Please show me that. So Shri Krishna says, oh, my dear, with these eyes, you will not be able to see. You need Jnana Chakshu. So he provides Jnana Chakshu, which means it is understood that, he uses the eye of wisdom to look at his form, and he sees the Vishwarupa, in which, there is Brahma, there is Vishnu, there is Mahesh, there is smallest of insects, there are, rivers flowing, and there is Kal, and there is death, and there is birth, and there is everything. And, he just goes down on his knees and he folds his hand in the realization that, oh God, in so many forms, I have disregarded you. In so many, and this is exactly what we are doing. It hurts me, pains me to see that people are now using glue traps to trap rats. They when you try to free them from that glue trap, they die because they are peeled completely. They are split completely. Where has our humanity gone? We come from the country where, an ant was considered the manifestation of Vishnu. The water bodies are dirty. We considered that Vishnu lived in water. The snakes are being ruthlessly killed. We had connected snakes to Mahadev. So I don't know where we are headed to. We are not destroying nature. In fact, in the entire process, we are destroying ourselves.
So anyway, even if you take it as an appearance and reality kind of thing, so the one appears as the many.
Yes.
So the fact that the one appears as the many doesn't mean that there will be a conflict between the many, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So every part of it is the same thing as because everything is an appearance. That is also
Absolutely.
another way in which Vedanta solves the environmental problem.
Correct.
In other words, Vedanta doesn't solve the problem, it rather dissolves the problem. There is nothing like environmental problems if only you are a strict Vedantin.
Yes, so Vedant basically says that, you take care of your Antahkarna, because all this pollution is a manifestation of your internal, states of disharmony, which is causing disharmony outside. So take care of yourself. If everybody is taking care of themselves, the world will be a much better place to live in.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Vandana ji. I am so, I feel like today morning has started in such a wonderful way for me because I could hear your wise words. And the way you have connected the Advait Vedanta to modern society is just so awesome. However, being a human being, I am conflicted. And I wish I had that wisdom that you talk about uh, to come to peace with it. But I know that I have this conflict and I am bringing it out in the open because, on the one hand, is Brahma, which is non duality and is real. On the other hand, we live in the Jagat, the world which is unreal and dual. And it also has mithya in it. So it's neither real nor unreal. And yet we are not separate from nature. So how do we as human beings achieve that non-duality in our life, in our lifetime, uh, so that we are in harmony with nature? And there are so many ways that we fail in our day-to-day lives. So what is that uh, path that we should be taking? If you could just
Yes.
explain to
Yeah,
us.
sure. So, 2, 3 points here. First thing first, for a person who is confused in this city of Maya, for such a person, the text or the guru's advice to just have Shraddha, as I spoke, Sadhan Chatushtaya. So Sadhana Chatushtaya also has Shat Sampatti, which has Sham, Dam, Titiksha, Uprati. Then you have, see, Sham, Dam, Titiksha, Uprati, and then you have Shraddha and you have Samadhan. So, you have to have Shraddha on the text. You have to have Shraddha on the words of the Guru. You have to have Shraddha in the cosmic order. Also, the problem with us is we look at life which took place in the mother's womb and which is going to end in the cremation ground. Well, that is not true. Life is continuous. You don't have to be in a hurry that in this life only I have to be, realized. It is going to take time. Maybe your prarabdha, this is in this state, this is the best state for you. For, this state has been decided by your prarabdha, and after this state you will advance to the next level. And though you may consider that, oh, she's just talking like that, but that is not true. For example, a person who takes admission in a college, nobody guarantees him that he's going to get a degree. He has shraddha in the entire process of education system that one day I will get the degree. Likewise, you have to have shraddha in the cosmic order that one day you have to be rooted in the state of mukti one day. That is your niyati, just as it is the niyati of the wave to appear from the ocean, live in the ocean, and finally merge in the ocean. It is your niyati to finally realize that you are Brahman. It is the niyati of all beings. It is just that some will realize later and some will realize much before. And that depends on the prarabdha that they have created for themselves. So yes, I just hope I've been able to answer.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, you have definitely provided direction to me today. So thank you for that. Yes.
Thank you.
And Shraddha, for our audiences, if we were to translate this into English, what
Yes.
is the best word to define Shraddha? Is it
Yes,
faith?
Shraddha, no, Shraddha, Shraddha does not mean that you have blind faith on something. No, Shraddha means trust the process. Because you do not know the process, you need to trust the process. For example, if your elders are telling you that if you drive a car fast, you will meet with an accident. Although you have never driven a car, so you need to trust the process that your parents have already experienced. That is Shraddha. You can inquire. Take the wisdom of Vedant, inquire about it. You may disregard it or you may accept it. That is up to you. But till you don't reach that state of inquiry where you are fit enough to inquire, you need to follow the process. So that is Shraddha. Shraddha does not mean blind faith. No, no, no. Vedant is very practical. It is very scientific. It does not tell you that, have blind faith. It is just saying that, we are going on a journey. I am the guide, Vedant says. Till you don't reach the destination, please don't, lose faith or don't lose the path. Once you reach the destination, you have all the right to say, oh, I didn't like the path. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bela ji. Any other question for Vandana ji? So Bela ji, Shankaracharya is the one who gave a wonderful definition of Shraddha. And it says, Shastrasya Guru Vakyasya Satya Buddhi Avadharanam. So,
Yes.
Viveka Chudaman. So,
Yes.
you have, in order to get to the truth, you have to first believe that there is something called truth. And what is the path to that? That path without Shraddha is impossible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But for the common man, to simplify, so you have to have Shraddha in Ishwar, in Guru, and in Atma.
Absolutely. So Vandana ji, I was very piqued by your rendition of Mumukshutvam. I had never heard this staged Mumukshutvam.
This is my interpretation. So this is my interpretation.
Could you expand on it a bit, please?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't get you.
Could you expand on it? This
Yes.
Krama
So,
Mumukshutvam.
Yes. So for a worldly man, it does not matter. So let's say I'm talking about a labor, the labor class, or somebody who is selling tea. How would you make mukti relevant for him? So firstly, it is important that, he rises in his status. His buddhi becomes receivable. He's able to receive the truth. Right now, he is struggling with poverty, struggling with other problems. So it is important that, if you give Shastra Gyan to somebody who is already suffering from fever, he is not going to take it. It is not the right dhan. You see, the right dhan is that which brings out the person from his immediate suffering. Therefore, giving him medicine at that point is important so that he becomes capable of receiving that truth. Therefore, a person who is already enveloped in avidya, and when I say avidya, I mean to say has no education, is dealing with poverty, his son is, has become a thief, there are other problems in his house. Therefore, you have to first give him relief from that. And only then would he rise in this life or in the other life to a position where he will, be motivated for Brahma Jnana. So this was when I tried to make Vedant relevant for youngsters, youngsters means those who are smoking, who are drinking, who are into drugs, and who have all sorts of relationships. This is how I make mukti relevant to them. And I think it is important to reinterpret Vedant in today's time to make it more relevant so that, today's children are thinking, why should I read Vedant? What is there in it for me? And therefore, you have to make it relevant for them. So most of the people who come to me are people who are struggling with their relationships, who are having, because of relationship, they have started drinking, they have started smoking, and therefore, they know I talk about Vedant, and therefore I have to make it relevant to them. I have to bring them to a position first, fine-tune them so that they are able to receive Brahma Gyan. So Mumukshutva, if I tell them, oh, see the self in and all in the self, they'll say, okay, let it be, ma'am, forget it. So, yeah, that is my work which I have done.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Vandana ji.
Thank you
for
so
this
much.
very enlightening and very educative seminar. And one last chance. Anybody has any questions for Vandana ji? I don't see on the chat box.
When you have announced the name, I mistook you for Vandana Shiva, an environmentalist. Then carefully I said, you are not Vandana Shiva, Yeah. Anyway, you have a nice name. People will mistake you always to be that great environmentalist. Vandana.
धन्यवाद
Yes,
सर,
yes.
धन्यवाद,
Vandana
धन्यवाद।
Sharma Diya, the light
Yeah.
of environmentalism that will spread from India to the whole world.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm trying my best, sir, because a lot of people say, oh, Vedant wisdom or Upanishads are useless because they're all metaphysical. So right now I'm also trying to translate the Ishavasya Upanishad and the Mandukya Upanishad so that it makes sense to the younger generation. I'm
Yes.
trying to do that. It is a very difficult task though, but I'm trying my best.
Yeah, especially the Manduk Karika. The
Yeah,
Karika
the
is
415, Karikas or Gaudpad Acharya. Yeah.
I think we
One-
should have Vandana ji again, One session is not enough with her. So
Vandana ji has given us an offer of having a whole course on the Mandukya Upanishad. And
Yes.
very good.
so,
Excellent.
yeah, I will definitely try to spread the word to interested people, and then let's see how we can proceed with that.
Certainly, sir. So with my limited understanding, whatever I could put in front of you, I did that. If there were any errors or follies, forgive me for that.
No, you don't have to worry about that. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
we will announce the next seminar. It will be in March, but Belaji and I have a little bit of work to do before we can finalize the date and the speaker. So please be on the watch for that. And
Absolutely. Just one request to Belaji and Sen Gupta sir that please give me a certificate of this,
sure.
that we have presented.
We'll-
And pranams to Pappu sir and lots of love to everybody who was listening to me so patiently.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
with that,
you.
Namaste,
Vandana ji.
and see
Namaste.
you in the next seminar.
Absolutely. Bhavashankara Deshikame Sharanam.
Namaste.